He wasn't supposed to be remembered. Not like this. Not by anyone. And certainly not by a dog who had spent 2 winters sleeping in doorways and chasing ghosts through the streets of London. The morning air clung damp and cold, the kind that seeped through worn coats and settled into bone, carrying with it the faint scent of rain-soaked brick, petrol, and yesterday's forgotten rubbish. Commuters moved in steady streams along the pavement, heads down, collars up, footsteps brisk and detached, each one passing by the figure slumped beneath the flickering glow of a tired street lamp, as if he were just another shadow the city had learned to ignore. Oliver Hayes sat with his back against a chipped stone wall, his coat too thin for the chill, his breath slow and shallow, barely visible in the gray light of dawn. His hair, once kept with military precision, now fell unevenly across his forehead, damp with mist. There was something about the stillness of him that made people hesitate for half a second longer than usual, not out of concern, but uncertainty. Then they would look away, as people often do when faced with something they do not wish to understand. A paper cup rested near his boot, empty, save for a single coin that had been dropped without eye contact hours before. Above him, the sky held that pale, colorless hue that comes just before the sun decides whether to rise or hide. And a few meters away, just beyond the reach of the lamplight, something moved. At first, no one noticed. A shape, low and quiet, emerging from the edge of an alley where the darkness lingered longer than it should. The dog stepped forward slowly, each paw placed with careful intention, its coat dulled by time and weather, its ribs faintly visible beneath fur that had once been strong and sleek. A German shepherd, though thinner now, quieter, as if the city had taught it the same lesson it had taught the man. Stay small, stay unseen, survive. The dog paused, its ears lifted, not sharply, but with a quiet, uncertain tension. The world around it continued as usual, footsteps, distant engines, the hiss of a bus braking at the corner, but something else threaded through the air, something. Softer, older, a scent, faint, almost gone, but not gone enough. The dog's nose twitched, drawing in the cold morning air as if searching through time itself. It took another step forward, then stopped again, as though afraid the moment might break if it moved too quickly. For 2 years, it had followed fragments, traces left behind in places where memory lingered longer than people did. Park benches, train platforms, corners of streets where footsteps once matched its own. Each time, the trail had faded, leaving only silence in its place. And yet, this was different. There was something here, something that didn't belong to the present. The dog's gaze shifted, landing on the still figure beneath the lamplight. It did not run. It did not bark. It simply watched. The man did not move. His head hung slightly forward, his hands resting loosely at his sides, fingers curled, as though holding onto something no longer there. A passing woman slowed for a brief second, her eyes flicking toward him, then to the dog, then away again, her pace quickening as she pulled her scarf tighter around her neck. The dog remained. Time seemed to stretch thin in that small space between them, the city blurring at its edges, as if everything else had decided to step back and wait. A gust of wind slipped through the street, carrying with it the scent again, warmer this time, layered beneath the damp and the decay. Not just the smell of a man who had slept outside too long, but something older. Metal, earth, a trace of something once clean, now buried beneath years. The dog's body tensed, not in fear, but in recognition it did not yet trust. Its tail lowered, not in submission, but in hesitation. Because hope, after so long, is a dangerous thing. It took one more step, then another. Closer now. Close enough to see the faint rise and fall of the man's chest, to hear the quiet rhythm of breath that had not yet given up. The dog stopped just a few feet away, its amber eyes fixed on the face it could not fully see beneath the shadow of unkempt hair and the dull gray light. And still it did not move, because somewhere between memory and reality, something fragile hung in the balance. Not certainty, not yet, just the faint, trembling possibility that after everything the world had taken, after every road that had led nowhere, after every night spent waiting for a voice that never came, this might be the moment where the silence finally breaks. The dog does not breathe any louder, yet something inside him begins to tremble, a quiet ripple beneath the ribs, as though memory itself has found a pulse again. And the city, for all its noise, seems to recede into a distant hum while he stands there measuring the space between what is and what once was. Because 2 years is a long time for a scent to survive, and even longer for hope to remain unbroken. And still he waits, head slightly lowered, eyes fixed, as if afraid that one wrong movement might scatter the fragile truth forming in the cold air, while Oliver does not stir, not yet, his body folded into itself like a man who has learned to take up as little space as possible, his boots worn at the edges, damp from the pavement, his fingers pale against the fabric of his coat, and for a moment it would be easy to believe that there is nothing left inside him but breath, slow and quiet, unnoticed by everyone except the one creature who has never learned how to look away. And the dog takes another step, careful, deliberate, his nose lifting slightly as the wind shifts again, bringing with it something deeper this time, not just the surface of neglect or the weight of the street, but a trace buried far beneath, something clean once, something disciplined, something that carries the faint echo of command and trust and long days under open skies where the air did not smell like this, and his ears flick forward, catching the smallest sound, the faint scrape of fabric as Oliver's chest rises just a fraction more than before, and it is enough, not proof, not certainty, but enough to hold him there, suspended between instinct and memory, and a bus pulls away from the curb nearby with a hiss of brakes and a low rumble, sending a brief gust of air across the pavement that stirs Oliver's coat and lifts the edge of his sleeve just slightly. And for the first time the dog sees it, not clearly, not all at once, but in a fleeting glimpse, ink against skin, faded by time and weather, the outline of a shepherd's head etched into the man's right forearm, and something inside the dog tightens, not in fear, but in recognition that cuts deeper than scent, deeper than sight, something that belongs to a place where time does not pass the same way, and he freezes again, because this is the moment where truth either reveals itself or breaks apart, and Oliver shifts, just enough to draw a breath that catches slightly. In his chest, a small, involuntary sound that escapes him, not a word, not even a groan, just the faintest sign that he is still tethered to the world, and the dog's head tilts, his body lowering closer to the ground, as if trying to make himself smaller, gentler, as though approaching something sacred, and around them the morning continues to unfold, people moving, voices low, footsteps echoing against stone, none of them aware that something extraordinary is balancing on the edge of happening. And Oliver's hand twitches, a subtle movement, fingers curling and uncurling as though reaching for something unseen, and the dog takes another step, closing the distance to just a few feet now, close enough to hear the rhythm of breath, to see the faint rise of shoulders beneath the worn coat. And still he does not rush, because instinct has taught him that the most important moments are not taken, they are given. And the wind settles for a brief second, the air holding still between them, and in that quiet, something shifts inside Oliver, a flicker beneath the surface, like a memory brushing against the edges of waking, and his lips part slightly, a breath drawn deeper this time, and though his eyes remain closed, something in his expression softens, as if a dream has found him, something distant and familiar, and his hand lifts just an inch from his side, hesitates, then falls again, the motion incomplete but not meaningless, and the dog watches it with a stillness that borders on reverence, because he has seen that movement before, countless times, in places far from here, where commands were given not with force but with quiet certainty, where a raised hand meant stay, meant trust, meant you are not alone, and the dog's tail lowers further, not in fear, but in something heavier, something that carries the weight of waiting and the risk of being wrong. And for a long second, he does nothing, simply stands there, breathing in the moment as if committing it to memory before it can vanish. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he lowers himself onto the cold pavement, not lying down completely, but crouching, front legs bent, head lowered, eyes never leaving the man. A silent offering, a question without words. And Oliver's breathing shifts again, deeper now, more present, and his brow tightens slightly as though something inside him is trying to rise to the surface, something he cannot yet name, and the city light grows a shade brighter as the morning edges forward, casting a softer glow across the pavement, touching the edge of the dog's fur, the worn fabric of Oliver's coat, the faint lines of the tattoo that has not yet been fully seen, and in that fragile space between sleep and waking, between doubt and recognition, the world seems to hold its breath, waiting to see whether two lost souls, separated not just by distance, but by time and everything that time can take, will find their way back to each other, or whether this moment, like so many before it, why there is a moment, small and almost invisible, when the past presses gently against the present and asks to be let back in. And it happens now in the quiet space between Oliver's unsteady breath and the dog's unwavering gaze, because something has begun to shift beneath the surface of a man who has spent too long learning how not to feel, and it begins not with sight, not with sound, but with a memory so faint it could be mistaken for a dream, a memory of early mornings where the air carried the scent of damp earth rather than concrete, where boots met gravel instead of pavement, where a presence walked beside him not out of necessity, but out of choice, and Oliver's brow tightens slightly as though he is reaching for something just beyond his grasp, his lips parting again as a breath catches in his chest, deeper this time, more deliberate, and the dog does not move, not even an inch, because instinct tells him that this is the fragile edge of something sacred, the exact point where recognition either blooms or slips away entirely. And the city continues around them. Indifferent and unaware, a bicycle bell rings somewhere in the distance. Footsteps pass. A door opens and closes, yet none of it touches the stillness that has formed here, and Oliver's fingers twitch once more, this time lingering in the air just a fraction longer before settling again against the cold fabric of his coat, and the movement is subtle, almost nothing, but to the dog it is everything, because he has seen that hesitation before, in moments where command was about to be given, in seconds where trust was about to be tested, and his ears lift slightly, his body leaning forward by the smallest degree, drawn not by certainty, but by something deeper, something that has endured beyond hunger, beyond cold, beyond time itself, and Oliver exhales slowly, the breath uneven, as though the act of breathing has suddenly become something he must remember how to do, and with it comes a faint murmur, barely a sound, not even a word, just the ghost of one, something shaped by memory rather than intention, and the dog's heart quickens, not in panic, but in recognition that resonates through every fiber of his being. Because though the voice is broken, though it carries none of the strength it once held, the rhythm of it, the quiet cadence, remains unchanged, and for a brief second the world narrows to that single fragile connection, a thread stretched across 2 years of absence, trembling but unbroken, and Oliver's head shifts slightly, tilting just enough for the pale morning light to catch his face, revealing lines etched by time and hardship, shadows beneath his eyes, and something else beneath it all, something that has not entirely faded, and his hand moves again, this time not aimlessly, but with a faint, unconscious purpose, lifting just enough for the sleeve of his coat to fall back further, exposing more of the ink beneath, the shape clearer now, the outline of a German shepherd etched into his skin, weathered but unmistakable, and the dog's breath catches, if such a thing can be said of him, because this is no longer just scent or sound or instinct. This is proof, quiet and undeniable, and still he hesitates, because 2 years have taught him caution, have taught him that hope can lead to emptiness if grasped too quickly, and so he waits 1 second longer, then another, watching, listening, allowing the moment to unfold in its own time, and Oliver's eyes flutter, not fully opening, not yet, but enough to let in a sliver of the world he has been shut away from, and for an instant his gaze drifts unfocused across the pavement, past the shapes and shadows that mean nothing to him anymore, until it settles, almost by accident, on the form crouched before him, and there is no recognition at first, only confusion, the distant awareness of a presence where there should be none, and his brow furrows slightly, a faint crease forming as his mind struggles to place what it sees. Because the image does not belong to the life he has been living, it belongs to something else, something he has buried beneath layers of survival and silence, and the dog remains perfectly still, as though he understands that this is the final threshold, that any sudden movement might shatter the delicate process taking place behind those half-open eyes, and Oliver inhales again, deeper now, his gaze sharpening just a fraction as the fog begins to lift, and something flickers there, not yet recognition, but the beginning of it, the subtle shift from seeing to remembering, and his hand, still hovering slightly above his side, moves in a small, almost involuntary gesture, fingers curling inward in a motion that once meant stay, meant wait, meant trust me, and the dog feels it not as a command, but as a memory made real, and in that instant the distance between them, measured not in feet but in years, begins to collapse, slowly, quietly, as if the world itself is allowing it to happen, and the first fragile spark of recognition ignites, not fully formed, not yet complete, but enough to Chong. Recognition does not arrive like a sudden storm. It comes the way dawn does in a city like this, slow, reluctant, filtering through layers of doubt and disbelief until it touches something that has been waiting far longer than it should have, and Oliver's eyes open a little more, not fully, not with clarity, but enough to see beyond the blur of shapes and shadows that have defined his days, enough to notice the outline of the animal before him, the stillness of it, the way it does not behave like the others he has seen on the streets, scavenging, restless, wary. This one is different, this one is waiting, and that thought alone unsettles something deep within him, because waiting implies purpose, and purpose is something he has not allowed himself to believe in for a very long time, and his gaze lingers, uncertain, his breath uneven as though each inhale is a negotiation with the weight pressing against his chest, and the dog remains exactly where he is, crouched low, eyes steady, not pleading, not demanding, simply present, as if he understands that this moment cannot be rushed, that recognition must be earned, not forced, and a faint sound escapes. Oliver's throat, rough and quiet, shaped more by memory than intention, and though it is not a word, not yet, it carries the echo of one, something once familiar now buried beneath layers of time, and the dog hears it, not with his ears alone, but with something deeper, something that remembers before thought can interfere, and his body shifts forward by the smallest degree, a subtle movement that closes the distance by inches, not enough to startle, just enough to say I am still here, and Oliver's brow furrows as his mind searches for meaning in what he sees, because there is something about the dog's eyes that refuses to let him look away, something steady, unwavering, almost knowing, and it unsettles him in a way he cannot explain, because it feels like being seen, truly seen, and that is something he has not experienced in years, and his hand lifts again, this time higher, trembling slightly as it hovers in the space between them, fingers curling and uncurling as if recalling. An old habit, an old signal, something once second nature now reduced to instinct without context, and the dog's ears rise just a fraction, his posture tightening not with tension but with focus, because this is the moment he has been waiting for, not the reunion itself, but the sign that the man before him is still the one he remembers, still the one who once moved with certainty and quiet command, and Oliver's lips part again, and this time the sound that follows is clearer, fragile but real, a single word that barely carries beyond the space between them, stay. And it is not spoken with authority, not with strength. It is spoken as if testing whether the word still belongs to him, whether it still holds meaning in a world that has taken so much. And for a second nothing happens. The city continues, the light grows, the moment hangs suspended, and then the dog does something extraordinary in its simplicity. He does not move, not even an inch. He holds his position exactly as he is, as though the command has never lost its place, as though 2 years have not passed, as though the bond between them has simply been waiting for this one word to awaken it again, and something inside Oliver breaks, not loudly, not visibly, but in the quiet way that walls begin to crumble when they can no longer hold the weight of what has been kept inside, and his eyes focus more clearly now, tracing the lines of the dog's face, the familiar shape of the ears, the depth of the gaze, and recognition begins to form, not all at once, not with certainty, but with a growing sense of impossible truth, and his breath catches, sharper this time, as memory floods in, not as images, but as feeling. The presence of a companion who walked beside him through moments where words were unnecessary, where trust was absolute, where the world, no matter how uncertain, felt navigable because he was not alone, and his hand lowers slowly, no longer hovering but reaching, tentative, uncertain, as though afraid that contact might shatter the reality taking shape before him. And the dog watches the movement with a stillness that carries both patience and longing. Because this is the final step, the one that cannot be undone, the one that will confirm whether what he feels is real or simply another echo of something lost. And Oliver's fingers extend, stopping just short of the dog's fur, the space between them, charged with everything that has been unsaid, everything that has been endured. And for a moment he hesitates, his expression shifting between disbelief and fragile hope. And then, with a breath that trembles more than he realizes, he closes the distance, his hand making contact, and the world, for that single instant, seems to fall silent the moment his hand meets the dog's fur. It does not feel like contact with something new. It feels like touching a memory that has been waiting just beneath the surface, warm despite the cold air, familiar despite the years. And Oliver's fingers freeze there for a second longer than they should, as if his mind cannot quite accept what his body already knows, because the texture, the shape, the quiet steadiness beneath his palm is not something the streets could have invented, and the dog does not pull away, does not startle, does not break the fragile connection. Instead, he leans into it with a softness that speaks of trust unbroken, of patience, carried across time without complaint, and a sound escapes him then. Not loud, not sharp, but low and trembling, something between a breath and a whine, the kind of sound that belongs to moments where words are no longer enough. And Oliver's breath catches in his chest as the reality of it begins to settle, not all at once, but in waves that move through him slowly, each one carrying more certainty than the last, and his hand begins to move, almost without permission, fingers brushing along the dog's head, tracing the line from ear to neck, relearning something that once came as naturally as breathing. And the dog closes his eyes briefly, not fully, just enough to show that he feels it, that he remembers too. And for a moment the years between them seem to thin, not disappear, but soften at the edges, as though they are no longer a barrier but a distance already crossed. And Oliver exhales, a long, uneven breath that trembles on the way out. And with it comes a word, clearer this time. Still fragile, still uncertain, but real. Rex. And the name hangs in the air between them, quiet but undeniable, and the dog reacts not with sudden movement, not with noise, but with a shift so profound it changes the space around them, his body leaning forward, his head lowering further beneath Oliver's hand as though anchoring himself to the sound, to the voice, to the man who has finally remembered him, and his tail, still low, begins to move, not in wide arcs but in small, controlled motions, careful, restrained, as if he too is afraid of breaking the moment. And Oliver's eyes widen just slightly, the disbelief still there, but now mixed with something warmer, something that has not touched him in a very long time. And his other hand lifts slowly, joining the first, both now resting against the dog's fur, holding, not tightly, not possessively, but with a quiet need that he does not yet understand. And the world begins to return around them. The sound of footsteps, the distant hum of traffic, a voice calling out somewhere down the street, but none of it reaches into the space they have created. Because for Oliver, everything has narrowed to this single, impossible truth, that something he thought was lost beyond recovery has found its way back to him, not through effort, not through searching, but through loyalty that refused to let go. And his shoulders shake slightly, not from the cold, though the air still bites at his skin, but from something deeper, something that has been held in place for too long finally beginning to loosen. And he lowers his head, pressing his forehead gently against the dog's, eyes closing as if to hold the moment in place, to make sure it does not slip away like so many others have. And Rex stays perfectly still, accepting the weight, the closeness, the quiet confession in the gesture, because this is what he has been waiting for, not just to find him, but to be recognized by him, to be seen not as a stray, not as a passing presence, but as what he has always been. And time seems to slow again, the light growing softer as it spills across the pavement, touching the edges of their forms, outlining the connection that has endured more than either of them should have had to endure alone. And Oliver pulls back just enough to look at him again. Really look this time, taking in the changes, the leaner frame, the dulled coat, the faint marks left by a life spent surviving. And something in his expression shifts, a quiet understanding, a shared history written not in words but in what they have both endured. And his thumb moves absently along the dog's fur, a small, repetitive motion, grounding, real, and his voice, when it comes again, is steadier, still soft, but no longer uncertain. You found me. And the words carry more weight than they seem to, because they are not just an observation, they are an acknowledgement of something deeper, something that defies explanation. And Rex responds the only way he knows how, by staying, by leaning in, by refusing to step back even as the world begins to notice them. A passerby slowing for a moment, glancing at the scene before moving on, unaware that what they have just witnessed is not ordinary, not chance, but something rare, something earned through time and faith and the quiet refusal to give up. And Oliver's grip tightens just slightly, not out of fear, but out of recognition that this is real, that this is happening, that he is no longer alone. And for the first time in 2 years, the weight pressing against his chest lifts, not completely, not all at once, but enough to let something else in, something lighter, something that feels, for the fur hope does not arrive loudly. It settles quietly into the spaces that pain once occupied. And for Oliver it comes not as a sudden transformation, but as a subtle shift in the way he holds himself, the way his shoulders no longer curl inward quite so tightly, the way his breath begins to find a steadier rhythm beneath the weight of everything he has carried. And Rex feels it before it is seen, because he has always known the language of small changes, the slight easing of tension, the quiet return of something that had been missing. And he stays close, pressed gently against Oliver's side now, not demanding, not restless, simply present in the way that only true loyalty understands. And the city continues to move around them. But something has changed in the way Oliver sees it, because where before there was only noise and distance, now there is contrast. Now there is a point of warmth against the cold, a reason to lift his head instead of lowering it. And he does, slowly, his gaze moving across the street not as someone lost within it, but as someone beginning to notice it again. The pale light spreading across the buildings, the faint gold touching the edges of windows and pavement, the quiet rhythm of a morning that does not feel quite as heavy as it did before. And his hand remains on Rex, fingers resting in the thick fur as though grounding himself in something real, something that cannot vanish the moment he looks away. And he swallows once, his throat tight not from hunger, but from the unfamiliar weight of emotion returning after too long in silence. And his voice, when it comes again, is still soft but steadier, less uncertain. You stayed. And it is not a question, not even a statement. It is an acknowledgement of something he is only just beginning to understand. That while he had been losing himself piece by piece, something else had been holding on, something had refused to forget him even when he had nearly forgotten himself. And Rex responds not with movement, but with closeness, leaning in just enough for Oliver to feel the quiet pressure, the reassurance that does not need explanation. And for a moment they remain like that, still and connected, while the world passes by, a man in a suit glancing briefly before continuing on, a woman pausing at the corner, her expression softening for a second before she looks away, and none of them realize that what they are witnessing is not just a man and a dog. It is the slow return of something that had been lost, something that cannot be measured or easily explained. And Oliver shifts slightly, wincing not from pain but from stiffness, from the long nights spent without comfort. And Rex adjusts with him instinctively, rising just enough to remain beside him, to match the movement without hesitation. And Oliver notices it, the way the dog anticipates without being told, the way he stays aligned. And it brings with it another wave of memory, clearer this time, sharper, moments of walking side by side, of silent understanding, of trust that never needed to be spoken aloud. And his lips pressed together as he takes it in, the weight of what has returned settling deeper. And he lets out a slow breath, longer this time, steadier. And he looks down again, really looks, taking in the details he missed before, the faint dullness of Rex's coat, The way his frame is leaner than it should be, the quiet signs of survival etched into him just as they are etched into Oliver himself. And something shifts again, something protective, something that feels strangely familiar, and his hand moves along the dog's side, not just in reassurance, but in assessment, as though confirming that he is real, that he is here, that he has endured, and Rex allows it without resistance, standing calmly, accepting the touch, the attention, the recognition, because this is what matters. This is what he has waited for, not comfort, not ease, but connection, and Oliver's eyes soften, the tension in them easing just enough to reveal something deeper beneath, something that has not been entirely extinguished, and he nods. Once, almost to himself, a small, quiet gesture that carries more meaning than it appears, because it is the first sign of decision, the first indication that he is no longer drifting without direction, and he shifts his weight, bracing one hand against the wall as he begins to rise, slowly, unsteadily, his legs stiff, his balance uncertain. But there is a difference now, because he is not doing it alone. Rex remains at his side, close enough that Oliver can feel the presence, the support, even without contact. And when he finally stands, slightly hunched, slightly off balance, he exhales again, this time with a faint hint of disbelief, as though even this simple act feels different than it did before, and he looks down at Rex once more, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching the corner of his mouth, the first and longer than he can remember, and though it is small, though it is fleeting, it is real, and the morning light catches it just enough to make it visible, not to the people passing by, not to the world at large, but to the one creature who has been waiting to see it return, and Rex responds in the only way that matters, by staying exactly where he is, by matching Oliver's movement as he takes his first step forward, slow, careful, uncertain, yet no longer without purpose, because now there is direction, now there is presence, now there is something beside him that refuses to let him disappear again, and as they begin to move together, step by step along the pavement, the city does not change, the world does not pause, but something within that small, quiet space between them has shifted in a way that cannot be undone. The first steps are never the hardest. Because of distance, they are hardest because of belief, because after so long moving without direction, even a single step forward requires something Oliver has not trusted in years, and yet he takes it, slow and uneven, his boot scraping lightly against the damp pavement as he shifts his weight, and Rex moves with him instantly, not leading, not pulling, but aligning, placing himself just half a step behind and to the side in that familiar position that once meant readiness, awareness, and quiet protection, and the rhythm of it, though fragile, feels right in a way Oliver cannot fully explain, as though his body remembers something his mind is still trying to catch up with. And the street ahead stretches out in the pale morning light, shop shutters half lifted, a bakery door opening to release the faint scent of warm bread into the cool air, mingling with the dampness of the city, and Oliver notices it, truly notices it, perhaps for the first time in months. The way smells are no longer just background but markers of place and time, and Rex's ears flick at the sound of a passing lorry, his gaze scanning briefly before returning to Oliver, always returning, as though nothing in the world could be more important than maintaining that connection now that it has been restored, and Oliver's breathing steadies further as they walk, still shallow but no longer strained, each step easing something inside him that had tightened over the years, and his hand drifts once more to Rex's back, resting there lightly as they move, not for balance alone, but for reassurance, for confirmation that this is not something that will vanish if he lets go for even a moment, and Rex accepts it without hesitation, his pace adjusting instinctively to match Oliver's, slowing when Oliver falters slightly, pausing when he hesitates at the edge of a curb, and it is in these small adjustments that the bond reveals itself most clearly, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet understanding of need. And a cyclist passes, slowing just enough to glance at them, a brief look of curiosity crossing his face before he continues on, and Oliver notices that too, the way people look, the way they register. Something different even if they do not fully understand it, and for the first time in a long while, he does not lower his gaze in response. He simply continues forward, his posture still bent but less so, as if something invisible is beginning to lift him, and Rex senses it. The subtle change in the way Oliver carries himself, the faint shift from retreat to presence, and his tail moves slightly, not wide, not exaggerated, but steady, a quiet affirmation of something that does not need words. And they reach the corner where the pavement dips slightly before the crossing, the painted lines worn but still visible, and Oliver pauses there, not because he does not know what to do, but because he is not yet certain he belongs to the flow of movement around him, the crossing of streets, the rhythm of ordinary life, and Rex stops with him, turning his head slightly to look up, not questioning, not urging, simply waiting. And Oliver exhales, the breath longer this time, and he glances down at the dog, meeting his gaze fully, and in that look there is a question, unspoken but clear, something like, can I do this? Can I step back into a world that has moved on without me? And Rex holds that gaze without hesitation, steady and certain in a way that only comes from absolute trust. And it is enough, not because it answers the question, but because it reminds Oliver that he does not have to answer it alone. And so he steps forward, one foot then the other, crossing slowly, carefully, the world moving around them in its usual rhythm, cars passing at a distance, a bus stopping with a soft hiss. And yet within that movement there is a quiet stillness that belongs only to them, a space where time feels slightly different, where each step carries more meaning than it should. And when they reach the other side, Oliver pauses again, not out of hesitation this time, but out of something else, something like awareness. And he looks down the street, taking in the row of small shops, the narrow alleyways, the early light catching on windows, and for a moment he simply stands there, Rex at his side, both of them framed by a world that has not changed and yet feels entirely different. And Oliver's shoulders lift slightly as he draws in a deeper breath, filling his lungs in a way he has not done in a long time. And when he exhales, there is a subtle shift in his expression, not a smile, not yet, but something close to it, something that suggests the beginning of possibility. And his hand presses gently against Rex's side once more, a silent acknowledgement, a quiet thank you that does not need to be spoken aloud. And Rex responds as he always has, by staying, by matching the moment with presence rather than reaction. And together they continue forward, not with certainty, not with a clear destination, but with something far more important, a shared direction, a movement that is no longer aimless. And as they walk further into the waking city, step by step, something becomes clear in a way that does not need to be explained, that the journey ahead may still be uncertain, may still be difficult, but it is no longer empty, because now, for the first time in 2 years, every step Oliver takes carries the quiet, steady assure they do not walk far before the world begins to test whether this fragile return to something real can hold. Because life in a city does not pause to honor quiet miracles. It continues, indifferent and constant, and Oliver feels it in the way people move around him, in the subtle glances that linger just a moment too long, in the space that opens and closes as others pass by, uncertain whether to acknowledge him or avoid him. And once, that would have been enough to make him retreat, to fold back into himself and disappear into the rhythm of being unseen. But now there is a difference, small but undeniable, because every time that instinct begins to rise, his hand finds Rex again, fingers brushing against the steady warmth of fur, and it anchors him, pulls him back from the edge of old habits, and Rex senses it each time, the slight tightening in Oliver's movement, the hesitation that flickers through him, and he responds without thought, adjusting his pace, drawing just a fraction closer, his presence quiet but firm, a reminder that he is there, that he has not come this far to let the man slip away again. And they move past a row of shops just beginning to open, metal shutters lifting with a dull clatter, the smell of coffee drifting out into the street from a small cafe on the corner, rich and warm, cutting through the dampness of the morning air, and Oliver slows without meaning to, his head turning slightly towards the scent, something stirring within him, not hunger alone, though that is there too, but recognition of something ordinary, something once part of a routine he had long since abandoned. And he stands there for a second, just outside the doorway, uncertain, as though crossing that threshold would require more than simply stepping forward. And Rex stops with him, looking up briefly before settling again, patient, waiting, never urging, and a woman inside the cafe glances towards the window, her eyes catching the sight of them, lingering for a moment before she looks away, not unkindly, just uncertain, and Oliver notices that too. The way the world reacts, the quiet distance people place between themselves and those they do not understand. And for a second the old instinct returns, the urge to step back, to move on, to remain where he belongs on the edges of things. But then Rex shifts slightly beside him, a small movement, barely noticeable, yet enough to break the pattern, and Oliver exhales slowly, his breath steadying as he stands there, not retreating, not moving forward either, simply allowing the moment to exist without deciding what it must become. And after a few seconds he turns away, not out of defeat, but out of readiness for something smaller, something he can manage, and they continue walking, the pavement stretching ahead, the light growing stronger now as the morning settles in. And with each step Oliver feels something unfamiliar taking shape within him. Not confidence, not yet, but something quieter, something like permission, the sense that he does not have to solve everything at once, that moving forward can begin with something as simple as walking, as simple as staying present. And Rex matches him step for step, his gaze alert, scanning the surroundings in that steady way he always has, yet never straying far from Oliver, always returning, always checking. And they pass a small park, its iron gates slightly ajar, the grass inside damp with dew. A few early walkers moving slowly along the paths, their breaths visible in the cool air, and Oliver pauses again, this time not from hesitation but from something else, something that draws him inward, and he looks through the gate, taking in the open space, the quiet contrast to the narrow streets they have been walking. And for a moment he simply stands there, Rex at his side, both of them still, as if remembering something shared, something that does not need to be spoken. And Oliver's hand moves absently to the tattoo on his arm, fingers tracing the familiar outline beneath the worn fabric. And there is a shift in his expression, subtle but real, as though he is beginning to piece together not just what has been lost, but what still remains. And Rex watches him, not interrupting, not demanding attention, simply staying close, because this too is part of the process, not just the reunion, but the rebuilding, the quiet moments where memory and present begin to align. And after a while Oliver lowers his hand, his gaze lifting again, and he steps forward, this time through the gate, onto the grass, his boots pressing lightly into the damp earth, leaving faint impressions behind. And Rex follows without hesitation, his pace unchanged, his presence constant. And as they move further into the park, away from the noise of the street, something within Oliver settles a little more, the tension easing, the weight shifting, not gone, not yet, but lighter, manageable. And for the first time since the morning began, he allows himself to pause without fear, to stand still without feeling lost. Because now stillness does not mean emptiness. It means presence. It means sharing a moment with something that has endured. And as he looks down at Rex again, there is a quiet understanding in his eyes, something that does not need words, something that simply is. And Rex meets that gaze with the same steady certainty he has carried through every step, every mile, every day of waiting. Because for him, this was never about finding the way back. It was about never forgetting where he belonged. And now, standing there in the soft light of morning, beside the man he never stopped searching for, that truth no longer feels like hope. It feels like something solid, something real, something that cannot be taken away again. The park does not speak, yet it holds a kind of quiet that feels different from the silence of the streets, a silence that does not press down but opens outward. And Oliver stands within it as though unsure how to occupy that space, his boots damp from the grass, the faint scent of earth rising around him, cleaner than the city air, softer somehow. And Rex remains close, not touching now, but never more than a step away, his presence steady, watchful, as though guarding not just the man but the moment itself. And for a while they do nothing, simply exist in that shared stillness, watching as the world moves gently at a distance, a jogger passing along a curved path, an elderly couple walking slowly beneath the trees, their voices low and unhurried. And Oliver notices the rhythm of it all, the way life continues without urgency here, the way time seems to stretch just enough to let a person breathe. And he draws in a deeper breath again, filling his lungs fully this time, and it feels unfamiliar, almost strange, as though his body is relearning something it once knew without effort. And when he exhales, his shoulders drop slightly, the tension easing another fraction, and his gaze drifts across the open space before settling once more on Rex. And there is something in that look now that was not there before, not just recognition, not just relief, but something closer to understanding. The quiet realization that this is not a moment that will pass, not something fleeting, but something that has chosen to remain. And he lowers himself slowly onto a nearby bench, the wood cool beneath him, worn smooth by years of use. And the movement is careful, deliberate, as though he is testing the ground beneath him, making sure it will hold. And Rex follows without hesitation, settling at his feet with the same calm certainty he has carried through every step of this journey. His body angled slightly outward, alert but at ease, and Oliver rests. His hands on his knees for a moment, fingers still, then one hand drifts down again, finding the familiar line of Rex's back, and the contact is no longer tentative, no longer uncertain. It is steady, grounded, and he lets it remain there, not needing to move, not needing to do anything more than feel that connection. And time passes in that quiet way it does when nothing demands attention. Seconds stretching into something softer, something less defined, and Oliver's thoughts begin to settle. As well, no longer scattered, no longer pulled in a dozen directions at once, but gathering slowly, forming something clearer, something more coherent. And with it comes the weight of memory, not overwhelming this time, not sharp or painful, but present, like a tide returning to shore after a long absence. And he closes his eyes briefly, allowing it to surface, the sense of purpose he once carried, the discipline, the structure, the quiet certainty of knowing where he belonged. And for a moment, it feels distant, almost unreachable. But then there is the warmth beneath his hand, the steady rise and fall of Rex's breathing, and it anchors him again, reminding him that not everything has been lost, that some parts of who he was have endured in ways he could not have imagined. And he opens his eyes once more, his gaze clearer now, more focused, and he looks down at Rex, studying him with a kind of quiet intensity, taking in the details not just of what he is now, but of what he represents. And his lips press together slightly as a thought takes shape, slow but certain, and he nods once, almost imperceptibly, as though agreeing with something only he can hear, and his voice, when it comes, is low, steady, carrying more strength than before. We are not finished, and the words are not loud, not dramatic, but they carry weight, not just as a statement, but as a decision, a shift from endurance to intention. And Rex responds not with movement, but with attention, his ears lifting slightly, his gaze turning upward, meeting Oliver's with that same unwavering steadiness. And in that exchange something settles between them, something that feels less like a question and more like a promise. And Oliver leans back slightly against the bench, his posture easing, not collapsing but resting. And for the first time in a long while, the future does not feel like something to avoid. It feels like something that might be faced, one step at a time. And the park continues around them, unchanged, the light growing warmer as the morning deepens. And yet within that small space, within the quiet presence of a man and a dog sitting together, something profound has shifted, something that cannot be undone, because it is not built on circumstance or chance. It is built on something far more enduring, something that has already survived distance, time, and silence. And as Oliver sits there, his hand resting lightly on Rex, his breath steady, his gaze no longer lost but searching, it becomes clear in a way that does not need to be spoken aloud, that whatever comes next, whatever path unfolds beyond this moment, it will not be faced in isolation, because some bonds are not broken by absence, they are only tested by it. And when they hold, when they endure, they return not as they were, but as something stronger, something quieter, something that does not need to prove itself to the world, because it already knows exactly what it is. There is a quiet kind of courage that does not announce itself. It does not rise with noise or certainty. It simply chooses, again and again, to remain present. And Oliver feels it now in the way he stays seated on that worn bench instead of retreating back to the edges of the city, in the way he does not lower his gaze when someone passes close by, in the way his hand continues to rest against Rex, as though it has rediscovered something it had always known. And the morning light shifts gently across the park, soft gold filtering through the leaves, touching the damp grass and the path where a few more people have begun to walk. Their voices quiet, their pace unhurried. And for once, Oliver does not feel outside of it all. He does not feel like something apart, because there is a thread now, invisible but real, connecting him back to the rhythm of ordinary life. And Rex senses that change as clearly as he senses the wind, his posture, relaxed yet attentive, his gaze moving occasionally to the surroundings, but always returning, always checking, always anchored to the man beside him. And Oliver shifts slightly on the bench, his back straightening a little more, his shoulders no longer folding inward quite so tightly. And it is a small change, almost imperceptible to anyone passing by. But to Rex it is everything, because it speaks of something returning, something rebuilding itself from the inside out. And Oliver's eyes drift once more across the park, lingering this time on a small group near the path. A woman kneeling to adjust the scarf of a young child, her movements gentle, unhurried. And there is something about that simple act that holds his attention longer than it should, not because it is remarkable, but because it is ordinary. And for a moment he realizes how far he has been from that kind of quiet normality, how distant it has felt. And yet here it is, just a few steps away, not unreachable, not closed to him. And the thought settles slowly, not as pressure but as possibility. And he exhales again, steady, controlled, and his hand moves from Rex's back to the side of his neck, fingers brushing lightly along the fur in a gesture that feels almost automatic now, almost remembered rather than relearned. And Rex leans into it just slightly, his eyes softening, not closing completely but easing, as though he understands that this is not just comfort, it is reassurance, it is grounding, it is the rebuilding of something that was never truly lost. And time passes in that quiet way again, minutes slipping by without urgency, and Oliver's mind, once crowded with noise and fragments, begins to organize itself, thoughts aligning, questions forming not as burdens but as steps. And he glances down at his own hands, turning them slightly, noticing the wear, the lines, the marks left by time and circumstance. And for the first time in a long while, he does not look at them with detachment. He looks at them with recognition, as something that still belongs to him, something that can still be used, still be guided. And he nods once more, that small, almost private gesture, and then he leans forward, placing his weight on his legs as he prepares to stand again. And this time the movement is steadier, less hesitant, not because the effort is easier, but because the intention behind it is clearer. And Rex rises immediately with him, fluid and certain, positioning himself once more at Oliver's side without needing to be told. And as Oliver straightens, fully upright now, he pauses for a brief second, feeling the balance settle, feeling the ground beneath him, feeling the presence beside him. And it is enough, not perfect, not complete, but enough to continue. And he looks ahead, towards the path that winds through the park, leading back towards the city beyond. And there is a moment where he could turn away, where he could choose to remain in the safety of this quiet space. But something inside him has already shifted beyond that point. Something has already chosen movement over stillness. And so he takes a step forward, then another, and Rex moves with him, their pace aligned, their direction shared. And as they walk, the distance between who Oliver has been and who he might become does not feel like a gap that must be crossed all at once. It feels like a path, something that can be followed, step by step, moment by moment. And the sounds of the park begin to blend once more with the distant hum of the city, the boundary between the two softening as they approach the gate again. And Oliver's gaze lifts slightly, his posture straighter than it has been all morning. And though there is still uncertainty there, still questions waiting to be answered, there is something else now as well, something that has taken root quietly but firmly, a sense that forward is no longer an abstract idea. It is something he is already doing, something he has already begun, and Rex remains at his side through it all, not guiding, not leading, but accompanying, as he always has, as he always will. And as they near the edge of the park, where the pavement meets the grass and the world begins again in its usual rhythm, Oliver glances down once more, meeting Rex's gaze with a quiet steadiness of his own. And there is no need for words in that moment, no need for confirmation, because Both of them understand in a way that goes beyond language, that whatever comes next, whatever challenges still lie ahead, they will meet them together, not as they once were, but as they are now, changed, tested, and still. Crossing the park's boundary feels different this time, not like stepping back into something that will swallow him whole, but like entering a place he can now stand within. And Oliver notices it in the way his pace does not falter as they reach the pavement again, in the way his shoulders remain steady even as the sounds of the city rise to meet him, and Rex moves beside him with the same quiet precision, his presence unchanged, constant as breath, and for a few moments they walk without direction, not lost, not searching, simply moving, allowing the rhythm of their steps to settle into something natural, something shared, and the street ahead is busier now. The early morning having given way to the steady flow of people beginning their day, coats brushing past, voices overlapping, the faint clatter of cups from a nearby cafe spilling into the air, and Oliver feels the difference immediately, the density of it, the closeness, but it does not close in on him the way it once did, because now there is space within it, a small, steady space carved out by the presence at his side, and Rex's ears flick once, then settle again, his attention divided but never scattered, always returning, always anchored, and Oliver's gaze moves forward, not down, not away, but forward, and there is something in that simple shift that carries more weight than it should, because it means he is no longer only reacting to the world, he is beginning to move through it, and they passed the cafe they had stood outside earlier, the scent of coffee stronger now, richer, drawing a few people inside, and Oliver slows again. But this time the hesitation feels different, not rooted in fear, but in consideration, and he stands just beyond the doorway, watching for a moment, the light inside warm, the movement gentle, and Rex pauses with him, turning his head slightly, not pulling, not resisting, simply acknowledging the change in pace, and Oliver exhales slowly, his breath steady. And he takes a small step closer, then stops again, as though testing the ground beneath him. And for a second the old instinct flickers, the urge to turn away, to remain outside, but it fades more quickly now, replaced by something quieter, something steadier, and he glances down at Rex, meeting his gaze, and there is no urgency there, no expectation, only that same unwavering presence, and it is enough, because it reminds Oliver that he does not need certainty to take a step, he only needs the willingness to try, and so he does, one step forward, crossing the threshold, the sound of the street softening behind him as the door closes gently, and the warmth inside wraps around him in a way that feels unfamiliar, almost distant, and he pauses just inside, taking it in, the low murmur of voices, the clink of cups, the smell of fresh bread and coffee, and for a moment he simply stands there, not because he does not know what to do, but because he is allowing himself to be there, fully, without retreating, and Rex follows him without hesitation, settling close at his side, calm, composed, drawing a few glances from those nearby, curious but not unkind, and Oliver notices them. The way eyes linger, the quiet curiosity, but it does not push him back, not this time, because there is something else holding him steady, something stronger than the weight of being seen, and he moves slowly towards the counter, his steps measured, his posture still slightly guarded but no longer closed, and when he reaches it, he stops, his hands resting lightly against the worn wood, and for a second he says nothing, not out of uncertainty, but because the act of being here, of standing, of choosing this moment, feels significant in a way that words cannot quite capture, and the person behind the counter looks up, their expression neutral at first, then softening slightly as they take in the scene, the man, the dog, the quiet stillness between them, and Oliver meets their gaze briefly, not holding it too long, but not dropping it either, and when he speaks, his voice is low but clear, carrying more steadiness than before. "Tea, please." And it is a simple request, ordinary, unremarkable, and yet it feels like something more, like a step back into a life he thought had closed its doors to him, and the person nods, turning to prepare it without question, and Oliver waits, his hand once again finding Rex, resting there lightly, grounding himself in the present, and Rex remains still, attentive but calm, his presence unchanged despite the new surroundings, because for him, the place does not matter. Only the person beside him does. And as Oliver stands there, waiting, watching, breathing, something settles more deeply within him. Something that feels less like recovery and more like return, not to what was, but to what can still be. And when the cup is placed before him, warm and steady, he reaches for it, his fingers wrapping around it with a quiet certainty. And for a moment he simply holds it, feeling the heat, the weight, the reality of it. And then he nods once, softly, in thanks, and steps aside, moving towards a small table near the window, Rex following without hesitation. And as they sit there together, the world continuing around them, something becomes clear in a way that does not need to be spoken aloud. That this is not the end of anything, not a conclusion, but a beginning, quiet and steady, built not on grand gestures but on moments like this, small, deliberate, real. And as Oliver lifts the cup, taking a slow, careful sip, his gaze drifting briefly to Rex, there is a calm in his eyes that was not there before, a quiet understanding that whatever lies ahead, he has already taken the most important step, not alone, but together. Warmth does not only come from the cup in Oliver's hands. It begins to settle somewhere deeper, somewhere that has been cold for far longer than the morning air ever could explain. And he sits there by the window, the soft light filtering through the glass, catching the faint steam rising from the tea. And for a moment he simply watches it, the slow curl of it into the air, the way it disappears without urgency. And there is something calming in that, something that mirrors the quiet pace of everything around him. And Rex lies at his feet, still, composed, his body relaxed yet aware, his ears flicking occasionally at the low sounds of the cafe, the murmur of conversation, the soft clink of porcelain. And Oliver's hand drifts down again, resting gently along Rex's back, the contact now natural, no longer something he has to think about. And he takes another sip, slower this time, letting the warmth settle, letting it remain, and his gaze shifts beyond the window, out to the street where people continue to pass, coats brushing, heads turned forward, each of them moving within their own small world. And he notices how different it feels now, how the distance between him and them is no longer defined by separation but by choice. And that realization does not come with pressure, it comes quietly, like the rest of this morning has, steady and unforced. And he exhales, placing the cup down carefully, his fingers lingering around it for a second before releasing, and his eyes lower briefly, not in retreat, but in thought, as something begins to form, something that has been waiting beneath the surface since the moment Rex found him. And it is not a plan, not yet, but it is direction, and that alone is enough to shift something within him. And Rex senses it immediately, the slight change in Oliver's breathing, the way his posture straightens just a fraction more, and he lifts his head, his gaze turning upward, attentive, as though recognizing that something new is taking shape. And Oliver notices it, the awareness, the quiet readiness, and a faint expression crosses his face, not quite a smile, but something softer, something that holds both gratitude and understanding. And he leans forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table, his hands loosely clasped, and he looks down at Rex, holding that gaze for a moment longer than before. And there is something unspoken there, something that does not need language, because it has already been proven in the way they have found each other again. And he nods once, slowly, as though confirming something to himself, and then he reaches into his coat, his fingers searching briefly before finding the edge of something worn, something small, and he draws it out carefully, placing it on the table in front of him. And it is simple, unremarkable to anyone else, a small metal tag, dulled by time. The edge is slightly worn, but the engraving still faintly visible beneath the surface. And Oliver looks at it for a long moment, his eyes steady, his breath even, and for a second the world around him fades again, not into silence this time, but into something softer, something that allows the past to exist without overwhelming the present. And he reaches out, his fingers brushing across the metal, tracing the letters, and though he does not speak them aloud, they are there, clear in his mind, a name, a memory, a connection that has endured beyond everything that tried to erase it. And Rex watches him, still and patient, as he always has been, as he always will be. And after a while Oliver lifts the tag, turning it slightly so that the light catches it, and he glances down again, meeting Rex's eyes, And there is no hesitation now, no doubt, only a quiet certainty. And he speaks softly, his voice calm, steady. We begin. Again. And the words do not carry weight because of how they sound, but because of what they mean, because they are not spoken lightly. They are spoken with the understanding of everything that has been lost and everything that still remains. And Rex responds in the only way he knows how. By staying, by holding that gaze, by allowing the moment to settle without rushing it. And Oliver places the tag back into his coat, not as something hidden, but as something kept, something that belongs with him. And he sits back slightly, his posture more at ease now, more aligned with the space he occupies, and the sounds of the cafe return fully, the voices, the movement, the quiet rhythm of ordinary life, continuing around them. And yet within that rhythm there is a shift, subtle but real, because Oliver is no longer outside of it. He is within it, part of it, present in a way he has not been for a very long time. And he reaches for the cup again, lifting it slowly, taking another sip, and this time the warmth does not feel unfamiliar. It feels right. It feels earned. And as he sets it down once more, his gaze drifts to Rex again, and there is something settled in his expression now, something steady, something that does not waver. And in that quiet exchange, in that shared understanding, it becomes clear in a way that needs no explanation, that this is not simply a return to what once was. It is the beginning of something shaped by everything they have endured, something quieter, stronger, and far more enduring than anything that could have been before, because sometimes what is rebuilt is not a replacement for what was lost. It is something deeper, something that carries both the weight of the past and the promise of what still lies ahead. And as Oliver sits there, the light growing warmer, the city moving beyond the window, and Rex resting steadily at his side, that promise no longer feels distant. It feels close enough to reach, one step at a time. Some endings do not arrive with finality. They arrive with a quiet sense of continuation, as though the story has simply found a steadier path rather than reaching a conclusion. And Oliver sits for a moment longer by the window, the cup now empty, the warmth lingering faintly in his hands. And he looks out at the street once more, not as someone observing from a distance, but as someone preparing to step back into it with intention. And Rex rises before he is asked, sensing the shift not in movement but in resolve, his body aligning naturally beside Oliver as though nothing has ever been uncertain between them. And when Oliver stands, there is no hesitation this time, no testing of balance or doubt in the motion, only a quiet steadiness, a grounded presence that carries forward with him. And he reaches down briefly, his hand brushing along Rex's neck, not to reassure himself now, but as a gesture of something shared, something understood. And together they move towards the door, the soft sound of it opening blending into the rhythm of the street beyond. And the air outside feels different now, not because it has changed, but because he has, the chill no longer pressing as deeply, the noise no longer overwhelming. And they step onto the pavement side by side, their pace measured but certain, and for a moment they stand there, not out of hesitation, but to take in the space before them, the city, stretching outward in all directions, alive, indifferent, yet no longer distant. And Oliver inhales slowly, filling his lungs, and when he exhales, there is a clarity in his expression that was not there before, a quiet acceptance of where he stands and where he can go from here. And Rex remains close, his presence unwavering, not guiding, not leading, but accompanying in the way that only true loyalty knows. And they begin to walk again, their steps aligning without effort, the rhythm natural, almost remembered. And as they move through the street, something subtle begins to shift in the way others see them, a glance held a fraction longer, a look that carries curiosity rather than dismissal, not because the world has changed, but because there is something different in the way Oliver carries himself now, something that speaks of presence rather than absence. And he notices it, not with discomfort, but with quiet awareness, allowing it to pass without retreating, because he no longer needs to disappear to feel safe. And Rex walks beside him through it all, his gaze steady, his movement calm, a constant reminder that some things do not falter when tested, they endure. And they pass once more by the places that had once felt like boundaries, the cafe, the crossing, the narrow streets that once confined him. And now each one feels less like a limit and more like a marker a point along a path that has already begun to unfold. And Oliver's hand brushes lightly against the tattoo on his arm as he walks, the familiar outline grounding him, connecting what he was to what he is becoming. And he does not look away from it. He does not hide it. He carries it with him as part of the story that has led him here, and Rex remains at his side, close enough that their movement feels singular rather than separate, and the city continues around them, unchanged yet entirely different in the way it meets them now, and they walk without urgency, without a defined destination, because that is no longer what matters. What matters is the direction, the movement, the shared presence that turns each step into something meaningful. And as the morning grows brighter, the light spreading across the buildings and the pavement, there is a sense of something settling into place, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to carry forward, enough to build upon. And Oliver glances down once more, meeting Rex's gaze. And there is no question there now, no uncertainty, only recognition, deep and steady, and he nods slightly, a gesture that holds everything that has passed between them, everything that has been endured and found again. And they continue on, step by step, not as they once were, but as something shaped by time, by loss, by loyalty that refused to break. And as they move further into the waking city, blending into its rhythm, yet never losing that quiet space between them, it becomes clear in a way that does not need to be spoken, that some bonds do not end when they are tested. They reveal what they have always been, and sometimes, when everything else has been stripped away, what remains is enough to begin again, not with certainty, not with ease, but with something far more enduring, something that walks beside you, step for step, through whatever comes next, and does not leave, no matter how long the road may be.